and welcome to Firstpost Spotlight, where we bring you stories that matter to you from all across the world. From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, we shed light on issues that shape our world. I'm Alison LaGrange, live from Durban, South Africa. Let's begin with the top headlines. At least 5 tourists feared killed as terrorists opened fire in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam. The security forces rushed to the spot after shots were heard. The area has now been cordoned off. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says the Washington and New Delhi are making progress in negotiating a bilateral trade deal. This comes after his meeting with Prime Minister Modi in Delhi yesterday. The US, Ukraine and its European allies are set to meet in London on Wednesday. As President Donald Trump pushes for a ceasefire more than 3 years into the Ukraine war. Hamas delegation heads to Egypt's Cairo to discuss new ideas for Gaza truce after the group rejected Israel's most recent temporary ceasefire offer last week. And UN Food Agency suspends aid for 650,000 malnourished women and children in Ethiopia due to a lack of funding. It had aimed to deliver life-saving nutrition assistance to 2 million people in 2025. Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest update coming in from Saudi Arabia, where India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi landed in the historic city of Jeddah earlier today for a 2-day visit. Prime Minister Modi will be in the Saudi city until the 23rd of April, at the invitation of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. This is Prime Minister Modi's 3rd visit to the country, having previously visited Saudi Arabia in 2016 and 2019. Prime Minister Modi is visiting the city of Jeddah for the first time. He is also the first Indian leader to visit the city in 40 years. Ahead of his visit, Prime Minister Modi addressed MBS as a brother and said that he was looking forward to co-chairing the second meet of the India-Saudi Strategic Partnership Council. Prime Minister Modi is also set to hold talks with Mohammed bin Salman later in the evening. The two leaders are expected to sign 6 deals focused on strengthening ties, bolstering defense cooperation, and addressing regional political change. Trade and investment, energy, cooperation, defense partnership, and the India-Middle East-Europe corridor are expected to be the focal points during the Prime Minister Modi-Mohammed bin Salman meet. The ties between India and Saudi Arabia have gained strategic depth and momentum in recent years. Both the nations have mutually developed substantive partnership across several domains. New Delhi and Riyadh have steadily expanded trade ties over the years. India is the 2nd largest trading partner of Saudi Arabia, while Saudi Arabia is India's 5th largest trading partner. In 2023 to 24, their bilateral trade stood at $42.98 billion. Shifting focus to oil and energy now. Last year, Saudi was also India's 3rd largest sourcing destination for crude and petroleum products. India imported over 33 million metric tons of crude oil from Saudi Arabia during the same period. Saudi Arabia was also the 3rd largest LPG sourcing destination for India in 2023 to 24. Now accounting for 18.2% of India's total LPG imports. Another key area of partnership between India and Saudi Arabia is the defense sector. Defense deals. In 2024, India signed a significant contract with $225 million to supply artillery ammunition to Saudi Arabia. As maritime neighbors, India and Saudi Arabia also extended extensive naval cooperation with each other, and they have conducted 2 bilateral naval exercises so far, named Al-Muhit Al-Hindi. Now, this visit by Prime Minister Modi is also likely to focus on the revival of IMEC, or the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. Now, this will connect India with Europe through West Asia. Saudi Arabia is a key partner in this endeavour, and India wants to further advance the project. A fully operational IMEC promises to bolster India's maritime security and also to enhance its shipping capabilities and port infrastructure, along with boosting trade demand and supply. However, tensions and extreme volatility in West Asia could impact the timeline of the development of this corridor. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's crucial visit to Saudi Arabia comes amid rapidly evolving geopolitics in the region, with respect to Israel's war in Gaza and strikes in Lebanon, nuclear talks with Iran, and the rise of al-Jilani-led new government in Syria. While focusing on strengthening bilateral ties, will Prime Minister Modi and MBS together push for stability in West Asia? Now, for more on this, we have with us Professor Harshvi Pant, the Vice President of the Observer Research Foundation. Welcome to Firstpost Spotlight.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Professor, with both India and Saudi Arabia investing heavily in AI-driven innovation, how significant is this meeting in laying the groundwork for future collaboration in AI research, talent exchange, and ethical AI governance?
I think very important for both countries as we look at the changing nature of the work life and changing nature of the work environment that the two countries face. Their populations both are being exposed to multiple challenges of technology, the way technology is changing the future of work. And therefore, as Saudi Arabia becomes a forward-looking 21st century economy, India also tries to provide employment opportunities for its youth, for its demographic dividend. Labor mobility is very, very important between the two nations. And as labor mobility increases, the idea would be to lay the foundation of an innovative economy on both sides of the divide. So I think for both these nations, as they try to ramp up their developmental journeys, economic growth stories, it will be important to bring in the technology dimension in their economic growth stories. And that's what the two sides are officially saying that they would be doing. The collaboration comes because the two nations have specific assets that can be brought to bear as they together take this journey forward. So I think emerging tech, whether it is in certain critical sectors or whether it is across the board, is going to be a very important part of that collaboration.
Absolutely. And Professor, given Saudi Arabia's expanding military modernization efforts and India's growing defense manufacturing capabilities, what potential defense cooperation or technology transfer initiatives might emerge from this meeting?
I think this is quite extraordinary, because in defense, we have not had a very serious partnership with our Middle East partners as far as India is concerned. And so what we are looking at now is a completely changed landscape. As the Arab states in the Gulf, particularly the two leading powers like Saudi Arabia and UAE, come to terms with the reality that America is not going to be a permanent presence in the region, that America is going to change its approach towards the region. I think they are also looking for a diversification of defense partners, security partners, and the foundation was laid during the last visit of Prime Minister Modi to Saudi Arabia. And so while there are enormous opportunities now in terms of both collaborations, co-production and co-development, there are also opportunities as India expands its manufacturing base and looks to other countries for partnership. Munitions is something that has already been alluded to. It is already in the pipeline, but many more needs to come. And there again, deep tech, defense tech is going to be very, very important, particularly as the geography that India and Saudi Arabia are interested in, which is this Arabian Sea, Red Sea geography, where I think Saudi Arabia looks at India as a very important partner in managing non-traditional security threats like piracy. We are going to see more and more collaboration. We are going to see more and more responsiveness to each other's concerns. And we are going to see greater thinking in terms of what kind of defense capabilities can be brought to bear on the defense landscape in this part of the world.
And as global energy markets evolve, how could this meeting influence joint ventures or long-term strategic agreements in oil, green hydrogen and renewable energy between India and Saudi Arabia?
Again, this is a very fascinating area of development, because in the past we have seen India relying on Saudi Arabia for its energy security as a very important partner. And Saudi Arabia has played a very, very important role in that journey, and it will continue to play that role as India moves forward. But the realization in India that India wants to have a matrix of energy security, which relies also on renewable sectors, green energy, green transition that is happening, that is of importance to Saudi Arabia as well as to India. Both of these economies want to move beyond just the traditional sources of energy into a realm where they can tap into renewables as well for their economic growth stories. This is something where a lot of investment is needed. Saudi Arabia and India both have indicated that they are willing to invest in this sector. And they're, unlike, say, America, which is under Trump administration, is giving up on its commitments. Saudi Arabia and India are the leaders in taking on greater commitments, unlike in the past where they used to be shunning some of these responsibilities. So I think we are looking at a very changed landscape of taking on responsibilities, investing in critical sectors, and looking at the energy matrix through the lens of long-term sustainable evolution, where green energy, green transition plays a very important role in the economic growth trajectories of both nations.
Yes. Professor, thank you very much for being with us on First Post Spotlight. Moving on, amid frequent encounters with Chinese forces in the Indo-Pacific, the Philippine and the US forces kicked off their annual bilateral military drills. The annual drills, named the Balikatan, which means shoulder to shoulder in the Tagalog language, are being billed as the first full joint battle test for Manila and Washington. The drills, which will continue until the 9th of May, will see over 14,000 Filipino and American soldiers testing their joint fighting capabilities, especially in flashpoint regions such as the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. The U.S. Marine Corps will deploy anti-ship missiles in the Luzon Strait for the first time, while simulating retaking a strategically located island seized by an enemy. From the U.S. base in the islet of Balabec, the two sides will then expand their maritime security operations to the edge of the South China Sea, which Beijing claims almost in its entirety. The Philippines' Palawan province is set to remain at the center of these exercises. The Filipino province is closest to the Second Thomas Shoal, as well as the Sabina Shoal, where the Filipino and Beijing's forces have come face to face in recent months. The Palawan province will also host a live fire drill designed to prevent enemy forces from landing on a beach. Apart from the Philippines and the United States, Japanese forces will also participate in the exercise as observers. Australia, another key US ally in the region, has also sent a 200-troop-strong contingent for these drills. The joint exercises include some of the world's most advanced weaponry, such as Navy and Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction, or the NMESIS, and this is a highly advanced remotely operated anti-ship missile system. MADIS, or a Marine Defense Integrated System, as well as the famous Typhon missile system stationed in the Philippines since April of 2024, will also be used during these drills. Now, Washington has said that the use of this weaponry will demonstrate that while the US and the Philippines remain committed to peace, they also possess credible combat power. Meanwhile, Manila said that the exercises, while being a full battle test, are being treated as a rehearsal for the Filipino defenses.
Things like the Navy and Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System. Things like the Marine Air Defense Integrated System, MADIS, and the Army's medium-range capability, the Typhon missile. All here to bring together our capabilities to demonstrate and reassure the region that while we remain committed to peace, we also possess credible combat power that backs up that commitment. The commitment and our promise to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific.
So all of this that you're seeing here is a culmination of all of these efforts. What we're looking at here is really an exercise verging into a full battle test, which means we are now treating the exercise as a rehearsal for our defense.
Experts say the drills suggest the U.S. military is sharpening its focus on the Indo-Pacific in the wake of Chinese expansionist threat. And with that, these annual military drills will obviously be watched closely by China, as Manila bolsters its defense to counter the Chinese threat. Will these strategic simulations truly deter Beijing's expansionist actions in the region? This continues to be a developing story, and we will keep you updated. And shifting focus to South Korea, where China is accused of maritime assertiveness in the Yellow Sea. Reports say China has erected a fixed platform in the disputed waters near South Korea. The massive steel installation is reported to be anchored to the seabed and has a helipad as well, giving it the markers of a strategic construction. Reports say China is repurposing old and decommissioned oil drilling rigs for these clandestine constructions in the disputed waters. While Beijing claims the structures are intended for fishing, Seoul sees them as the latest example of Beijing's supposed grey zone tactics. Experts believe it's a part of Chinese strategy to claim South Korean waters inch by inch. Now that's because since 2001, Beijing and Seoul have a cooperation mechanism in place for activity in their disputed waters. Under this, apart from fishing, no other activity is allowed at a designated maritime provisional zone. Interestingly, Beijing claims these steel installations are supposed management facilities for fisheries in the region. Xi Jinping's government calls it, and I quote, reasonable use of offshore waters. But reports in the South Korean media liken the steel constructions of this scale with Beijing's construction of artificial islands in the South China Sea more than a decade ago. Under this, China first cemented natural reefs, then installed airstrips, and finally deployed military personnel, with neighboring countries barred from access to the maritime areas around them. The reports related to these Chinese constructions come even as China claims to be seeking to improve ties with South Korea and Japan. The three countries held their first trilateral trade meeting last month, where Beijing unsuccessfully tried to convince their South Korean and Japanese counterparts to launch a joint response to counter the Trump tariffs. But even as China claims to be ready to cultivate friendly ties with South Korea and Japan, its assertive maritime actions continue to raise questions on the reliability of its diplomatic efforts. And for our last story, let's turn our attention to a significant development in the financial markets. Gold prices have surged to an unprecedented high today, hitting the crucial $3,500 mark before pulling back to nearly $3,400 an ounce. Now, this record-breaking rally comes amid growing uncertainty over the economic impact of the trade war between the United States and China. Experts suggest that investors are increasingly wary of U.S. assets, and this due to the ongoing tariff worries and the escalating tension between President Trump and Federal Chair Powell. Now, Trump has once again openly criticized Powell's decision to maintain the current interest rates. Until there is more clarity on the inflationary impact of his tariff policies, This uncertainty has positioned gold as a prime beneficiary, capitalizing on the weakening dollar. Shifting our focus back to the escalating trade tensions between the US and China, Beijing has accused Washington of abusing tariffs and has warned that it will take resolute and reciprocal countermeasures against other countries negotiating with the US if they make a deal at China's expense during the trade war. Tit-for-tat tariffs between the US and China have reached 245% on the Chinese exports to the US and 125% on US exports to China. Trump's tariffs on China are the highest of the global tariffs that he announced for all US trading partners. As part of his so-called Liberation Day campaign, this month, as the US appeared destined for a recession, Trump announced a 90-day pause on his sweeping tariffs on all countries except China. Last week, Trump said that the US was in talks with China on tariffs, adding that he was confident the world's largest economies could make a deal to end the bitter trade war. China, on the other hand, has vowed to fight a trade war to the end and has not confirmed that it is in talks with Washington, though it has called for dialogue. Chinese officials have said the US needs to show greater respect. Beijing has strongly criticized what it calls unilateralism and protectionism by the US and has warned about an international order reverting to the law of the jungle. Gold has hit a series of record highs in recent weeks as investors seek refuge amid a weakening dollar and following sharp losses across stock markets. Gold is up more than 30% since the start of the year. Now, looking ahead, markets are keenly awaiting speeches from several Federal Reserve officials later this week. Investors will be scrutinizing these addresses for any hints about the future direction of monetary policy, especially amidst the US-China trade war and the ongoing debate about the central bank's independence. We will continue to monitor these developments closely and bring you the latest updates as they unfold. And that's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to First Post.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines, detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT, only on First Post.
First Post reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison LaGrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on First